Trying to do this, it's certainly pertinent with the timing of it.
Well, they asked me to speak this month, I think.
And maybe that's, it's again, the meeting has to do with the fitness
Yeah.
section, right? And if that's still being
But this is
selected,
based
then it's still
on
being
talk that I
selected.
did, that I kind
Which is where
of
you
tweaked for this
bias
venue that I
show
did
up.
about six months ago.
Oh, really?
In San Antonio, there was a conference in San Antonio.
Fortunately, it's bias, it's kind of hard.
A lot of stuff has happened since then.
It's true, that's true, there's a lot going on right now.
Well, yeah, well, that just goes back to there's always a lot.
It's a math instruction, but try to get your arms around
Yeah, just
how things will.
Go where you send them.
Well, the chaos was involved in the university, a much easier question.
We probably wouldn't exist without it.
It's very also true. But it makes predictability much harder to achieve. Or explain it to
I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Yeah, well, this gets back to the whole conversation, is there extraterrestrial intelligence? Again, this is developed elsewhere, but maybe you can.
It makes me confident that they're always weapons.
Or maybe it shows up all the time, right? We don't know what we don't know.
And that's about as far as we can take it, right?
Yeah. Unless you can find somebody that's willing to give you some grant money to go and study it somewhere, in some way, or build a better instrument.
Or wait scads of time to,
Yeah, my scads of time though,
Yeah, I don't know how to
kind of has this,
Rubber bound.
year boundary thing on it. Just silly for some reason. There's wasn't a thing there where you talk about whales today.
Hey, John, how's it going? Hey.
Lifetime of a whale.
And I brought my own personal voter registrar. So anybody wants to register to vote or change their address, she'll do it.
You have to have the correct address.
Huh?
that's not my church. That is just EFF right in the hallway. Yeah. Right by the door.
I'm curious how many people
No, I thought that was your voter registry.
Yes.
No, I should have read better.
Sometimes she does.
I was looking for all my little electronic cases. Couldn't find them. Turns out I had left them in the car. And so, like, all the 3D printed cases melted. Yeah, so like, most of them looked a lot. This was like one of my better looking ones. It's like still kind of.
So I'm here to register.
Oh, it's my mom.
So you have Travis County, right?
Yeah.
This is it, and just.
Is this the top floor of the building?
Yeah.
Are you? You want me to sign? No.
It seems like this is an awful lot of space that we can use for something else.
Yeah.
Hey,
Good to see you too. Good to see you too, Brendan.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. Hey, how's it going?
How you going Monday?
That's
Gosh, it was fun.
How much?
Liverpool, all the biggest stuff. I love it.
I knew you were gonna stay in London.
I stayed in London first, and then I went to Liverpool
Sign up and
for
they're
like
gonna
then back to London, over to Scotland and Ireland. Yeah.
Everybody seen you.
So, gosh, it's a lot of fun everything. I want to go back.
It's on what?
Lots of concerts.
Oh, wonderful.
Good title, Brandon.
Thank you.
Really good.
How long have you landed with the concert? How long have you landed?
The concert on the
That's not for the
8th.
mountain, but it's
So I
that's the, you know,
Four.
gotta be careful.
That's right, you flew on
went
Portland.
to Liverpool from London. It was great.
Now, was that supposed to be his last concert?
Yeah, we actually made these letters.
His last tour, but he's in New York too.
Oh, that's
That's
right.
his performance. So, never off the.
When was that?
Feel that.
No, it's not.
Gauge that is, stickers.
Yeah, I got one on my, stickers.
When I can't see the lid anymore.
No, I haven't. I went crazy with these stickers. When we got them, I put them on everything in the office. I'm pulling out the teapot, pulling out the ready printer. Yeah, feel free to take a sticker too. If you want to submit with number.
So that's the first time you've been to London?
Oh,
I've actually never been to Europe. I've been all over West Europe, except I remember the six. Flown over.
And I went once, and I flew to Paris and flew around for 2 days. And it was okay. But I was so proud of myself.
okay. So just,
Going back to
how did I
the
do that?
I wouldn't dare put windows on.
It looks like it's all been down.
The music that I know.
It's really kind of like an outdated way of verification. I think it's very.
So you went to Edinburgh?
I ended up getting back into town center and I thought. You what? Okay, you said really good to do it. Very good. Yeah, I got to town a little earlier than I thought, so here I am. Y'all look like you're all set up.
Yeah, I think
My
First,
first
you run.
run.
Got home.
We did. My niece kind of planned.
You can intro
So.
whatever you have prepared.
So, can I have a
Well, that's a good one.
schedule that's from 7 to 9?
You have that one.
But like, I don't have like 2 hours.
It'll all take 2 hours.
Never got in a car.
I have 2 hours to fix this out.
Well, yes, they have an audience.
Well, it's just enough of that. A couple of.
That's like very
Yes, exactly. But you know, this
So I
audience,
didn't know how
no
definitely
questions for 2 hours.
but I have to go back on my phone and do it.
Yes, Firehouse.
How many days total? 8?
It's on 14 days.
You pull it around.
Well, you know, I put on that alien.
No, I
So it's a really Indian food place on the corner.
need to ask you the question.
They're kind enough for Indian food like Europe, Texas.
Like I said, make it go the way of MySpace.
Yeah, I might say.
Maybe how they forgot that.
Yeah, Texas.
Nowhere, everywhere,
Several
nowhere.
Texas parents. White rice,
That is a story.
almost no spice.
I'm writing a story about
That's not a good reason to do it.
story like
But did you do it?
nowhere, all in
That's next time.
about 6 years.
breakfast. Pretty much.
Were you like part of this organization? Like,
You actually stood next to the window and looked down.
It's my first time
So
coming.
what's shaking?
Too terrifying.
When they were what they're about.
Thanks for coming out.
Have a,
So you love a good, good lecture.
That's right, I do.
well,
She is gonna get somebody to come in the voter.
well, I still need to get back with Counselor's people to get final confirmation. His secretary was like, working on it, stay tuned, and I'm like, well, it's 2 weeks, so we'd probably like to announce it sooner than
You
later.
do it a week later, we could do it.
Well, like you're in that other, they
I
have like
mean,
beer and
we'll
stuff.
see, I mean,
Finger
there was
boards.
a few other potential date options I was given. I mean, I'm not married to this date, I just need 2 days. And basically, if Counselor has not done lots of jobs, it's out of my hands.
So there was like maybe somebody that was like
Mayor or signs off on it.
counter defense. Yeah, it was like your something.
I mean, I don't know, we got other people. I mean, I suppose we could ask.
And if not, you could probably get taken away.
That's me.
I'm sure. Yeah, they're like, Ted Cruz, why don't you come down and tell us what Henry Turner is a bad idea?
So, maybe what you should do is introduce me and then I can introduce Brent.
Oh, yeah, but we
And
can
then
do
you can
birthday.
do all your EFF
We
Austin
can do
stuff.
birthday order, that sounds great, sure, we have to start writing, so.
So is this the live stream as well? Or?
This is for the Petupio News Network
So this is
podcast.
an audio podcast.
And then there is a live stream. Did you already chat with the AV guy about that, or?
What AV guy?
There is an AV guy, let me make sure we're good.
There wasn't anybody here. I
Alright,
did all
well, there
this
is.
and I'm all by myself.
Anyway,
Is that a camera? I didn't even, like, that doesn't even look like anything. I didn't even notice that.
Is it shaped like a baby's head? Sure, why not? It's a camera. Wait, is that? Oh, it's an echo. Can it play Despacito?
Alexa. I don't think it's
This is so sad.
I would love
Well,
to.
no, she's not listening. You see, she's got the red ring. So.
Oh, they're big. Wait, what is it? Is it echo? Did you say it's an echo?
I'm joking that it's an echo, and then we should ask it to play us something.
Whenever I walk in someone's house and they have an Alexa, I always say, "Hey Alexa, buy a laundry detergent." But it never works.
I'm really surprised when
But I think it would be fun.
Ryan is nowhere to be seen, that's how you show up. It, in theory, should be on, so I can check YouTube and see if it's on.
Can you,
I don't have the power to turn it on.
can you like put out the link to the live stream?
We always share the link on our page.
Oh, okay, so people
Are aware that it's, people are aware of this, yes. Yeah, I'll send you the link so you can.
So it's not.
I'm checking.
Oh, wait, it's on right now.
It should be.
Oh, okay.
They usually start at 5 minutes early, but I can't find Ryan, the AV guy, to see if he's actually.
I didn't get information because I work in
No, I was thinking that you, I was thinking you would have been fine getting here without me being here or John being here, because normally Ryan's around answering questions.
I just wish I knew we were live again because I would have been more entertained.
Ah, yes. Yes,
Wonder if I could make it.
yes, exactly. I'll study that live. Let's see.
Yeah.
Ah, it says live now, so I think we're okay.
Are we gonna get into it? No, if we watch it, wow.
Yes, that is gonna be what happens. See, this is a few
Oh,
minutes.
okay.
Yeah, so you're live, just, don't wander too far.
Okay, well, I'm tethered anyway.
And before we start, I will announce once more that my personal voter registrar accompanied me tonight and is sitting near the back door. And
Have to update your address.
are not registered to vote, you should register. If you are registered to vote, but you moved, you should file a change of address. I got.
Yes, and I'll second that anybody in this room who's not registered to vote is making the board very sad, so please go over there and register.
Is the live stream gonna be available afterwards? Like
Oh yes, it records, it is not ephemeral. This talk will be available if your friends could not make it.
For years.
Great, I would love to check it out.
Together.
Ask Marcia, what's a Marcia question?
easy is it to check to see if you're registered?
I don't know, Marcia, how easy is it to check to see if you're registered?
Come see me afterwards and I'll give you a website to check.
Just say yes, one second. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Wow, we got a nice crowd tonight. Welcome to the EFF Austin monthly meetup. My name is Kevin Welch. I'm the current president of EFF Austin. For those of you who are first timers, which I see both a lot of old and a lot of new faces, so for first timers, EFF Austin is a long-standing digital civil liberties organization based out of Austin, Texas here. We are closely affiliated with the more famous, but you know, we still do good work, Electronic Frontier Foundation based in San Francisco. We are a member, we're the oldest member of their EFA, or Electronic Frontier Alliance. So we fight for various digital civil liberties issues, net neutrality, encryption, getting rid of the NSA spying on you, fun stuff like that. We're primarily educational, but we do also do what limited political activism we are capable of. In fact, I'm excited to announce we're going to be doing a partnership with the UT Law School for the upcoming Texas legislative session, where some of their law students are basically going to be working with us basically and are going to help us advocate for these issues on the floor of the next session. So we're very excited about that happening. Thanks to John here. I'm going to go through a few announcements about what we have coming up in the near future before I'm going to turn it over to my colleague on the board, John Lukowski, who's then going to introduce our speaker tonight. So let's see, things we have coming up. We are working on putting together an event here at Capitol Factory that is going to be a tech policy panel with two local political candidates running for state office here who come from the tech sector. That's what their careers are in. We're going to be having a tech policy panel here at Cap Factory with the Steve Quinn campaign and the Joseph Kopser campaign. And I'm going to be moderating, and we're going to be discussing tech policy and why we think their campaigns are good for advocating for the issues we care about and getting more sane representation in state government. That is tentatively going to be Wednesday, August 29th. That date works for both campaigns, but I'm waiting for confirmation from Kopser's people that they got the okay with the Cap Factory people. That date may change. We're going to try to have it because everybody's interested, but that date may change. But it's tentatively about 2 weeks from now. We also have our monthly meetups coming up. September, we're going to have lawyer Scott McCullough is going to be speaking with us. He's going to be talking about the constitutional basis for where some of our privacy rights come from. And he's going to also be doing a deep dive into the consequences if Brett Kavanaugh is nominated to be a Supreme Court justice.
And he is a fiery speaker.
Oh yes, he. You think we're radical? Come listen to him talk. It's fun. So then in October, we're very excited that we're going to be hosting Ars Technica reporter Cyrus Barabar in conjunction with Book People for a presentation and signing of his new book, Habeas Data. So we're very honored to have him. Note the date's going to be a little wonky on that one. It will not be on Monday to accommodate his travel schedule. It is actually going to be the second Tuesday of October. So stay tuned to our meetup and Facebook and website and stuff to keep track of the dates. November, we're going to be partnering with some local hackers. We're basically going to be doing a live doxing demonstration where it's going to be a sort of securities 101 online. And we're also going to demonstrate how, if you don't have proper data security and keep your data safe online, how easy it is to learn absolutely everything about you. And finally, we are currently working on partnering with, I'm sure many of you know, the local meetup series Nerd Night. We are basically presenting November's Nerd Night. Myself, John, and our fellow board member Chris Boyd are each going to be giving a talk in November, so stay tuned for that. I'm trying to think of anything else interesting. Those are all the events we have really coming up for the rest of the year. We'll probably have a holiday party again of some kind, but I have not really worked out the details on that yet. Oh, and as always, EFF Austin, we are entirely volunteer driven. So if you like the work we do, please go on our website and donate to our PayPal. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to my fellow board member John here, who was going to present tonight because I thought I was going to not be able to make it, and he has some prepared remarks he's going to give to introduce our speaker. Thank you. Thank you, John. Take it away.
I just wanted to introduce Brandon, because I knew him before he was famous. Dr. Brandon Wiley is our speaker tonight. Dr. Wiley is president of Operator Foundation, a nonprofit founded to promote, similar to EFF Austin, by the way, founded to promote internet freedom, open communication, and global internet security.
And I think asterisk here, full disclosure, Operator Foundation is a former and hopefully future sponsor of EFF Austin.
Right on. Okay. So, I'll say again, internet freedom, open communication, global internet security through technology development, deployment, and education. The foundation develops hardware and software technologies to support access to credible and relevant information and open communication around the world. Dr. Wiley is a well-renowned expert on peer-to-peer, decentralization, and internet freedom technology. He is co-author of the book Peer-to-Peer, Harnessing the Power of Disruptive Technology, and has spoken at numerous technical conferences, such as Black Hat, DEF CON, South by Southwest Interactive, and now the EFF Austin. He's a Google Ideas Research Fellow, an Open Technology Fund Rapid Response Research Fellow, and a member of the Program Committee for South by Southwest Interactive, like myself. And a really smart guy. So Brandon's going to talk tonight about the future of internet freedom, why it will fail, and how we will save it. And I really hope we do save it. Brandon!
Yeah, thanks everybody, for coming out today. Thanks for EFF Austin. They've been a big supporter of internet freedom in general, and of the Operator Foundation, my organization, specifically, giving us a booth at their South by Southwest party and stuff to let us tell people about the organization and do fundraising. So, yeah, so just a little bit about me to just kind of give you some credibility so that you'll listen to the rest of my talk. My name is Dr. Brandon Wiley. I have a PhD in information studies. I know that sounds like a fake degree, but it's real. It's a real degree. Same as every other PhD. It's from here at UT. Yeah, I was a Jigsaw Research Fellow. We just called Google Ideas. That's Google's think tank technology incubator sort of program. I'm the president of the Operator Foundation, which is a nonprofit that I started here in town. And some of my past, if people are in the space and know about internet freedom stuff, I worked on some things that you might have known from the 90s or the 2000s, like Freenet and BitTorrent. And we do a lot of work with Tor, which is a big internet censorship prevention tool, and Dust. That was my dissertation. So I've been around. It's not my first time at the rodeo. Been around working on projects for a while. So in 2014, we founded this nonprofit, the Operator Foundation. And the idea is that we're going to make usable tools, like usability-centric, like usability first. Because if people don't use the tools, then it doesn't matter how secure they are. So we're going to focus on usability, and we're going to try to fight censorship, we're going to try to increase security, and we're going to try to protect people's privacy through these tools that we develop. And we are a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit. So we're not like an internet startup. We get donations and then we use it to give the technology away to people for free. And so our philosophy is we got three parts. One, technology. We develop technology. We make apps. We make hardware. We don't just recommend existing open source tools to people. We actually make the technology. And two is design. Everything is designed to be usable. That's the number one thing. And then people. Anytime we're gonna make something, we first go to the people that are going to use it and we say, hey, do you have any problems? Can we think of a technological solution? There's not always a technological solution. A lot of problems are social problems. They're problems that are caused by government, regulations and laws and things, and so we can't help with that. But if there's a solution that can be done with an app or with some hardware, then we make it and then we bring it back to the people. We say, hey, is this what you need? We don't just sit around, you know, like in our office, like coming up with ideas that sound cool and that don't actually work in the field. Everything is tested in the field. And, you know, it's not just me. We have a lot of people, you know, on the board that are working, that are volunteering their time to work on this. And then also we have, you know, a lot of different, you know, people on staff that help us do everything. So that's Adelita. She actually does, she's the software engineer. She does all the coding, and then Melissa does all the grant management. So, you know, my job, you know, is essentially I get to come talk to everybody and tell them all the great work we're doing, and then, you know, also kind of come up with some of the ideas and design the stuff. But we got a lot of people behind the scenes that are making all of this stuff work. So this talk is about internet freedom. We actually work on a lot of different things, but internet freedom is like one of the things that we do like the most work on. And you may be surprised when I tell you, you know, what our definition of internet freedom is. It's actually, it's kind of a technical term. It's like a term of art. There's like the Internet Freedom Festival that happens every year. So there's a lot of people that would say that they work in the internet freedom space. And so when I'm using the term, it may not be, you know, what you expect. So first of all, for me, internet freedom, I'm talking about on a global level, right? So we, you know, in the context of the US, we think a lot about things like net neutrality and things like that, and we really have. And we also have a constitutionally based law system where by amendment, times when I talk to people from the US, they're really shocked how bad the internet conditions are in other countries. And I'm not talking about here just the connectivity, but just like what you're allowed to do on the internet. So I define, you know, internet freedom as having access to credible and reliable information, just about the normal things that you want to do, right? Like you want to get on the internet because you have a question or you want to know what's going on in the world. Can you access that information? Can you access information which is true? Can you access information which is, you know, relevant to your needs? And that seems, you know, and the US is like, oh, we have like maybe too much access to information. You know, like we have access to information that we don't even know what to believe anymore, because there's just so much, you know, stuff out there. So in other countries, they have a problem that a lot of websites are blocked. So like in a lot of countries, Facebook is blocked, YouTube is blocked, Gmail, Google, anything which is at all critical to the local government will often be blocked. And then additionally, you know, allows you to circumvent the blocking that's going on. Those are also not allowed. And then also any kind of tool which allows free communication. So like a lot of chat applications, so like WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, Facebook Messenger, anything that allows you to freely communicate with people. Skype is another thing that's blocked in a lot of countries. That will be blocked because it allows this free flow of information. And in those countries, what they want to do is essentially allow only state-controlled information. So only state-controlled newspapers are allowed to exist. If you have a newspaper that says something critical about the government, then you no longer have a newspaper. All of the like TV news is controlled by the government. So the internet, you know, is kind of a place that people go for free information, which is why the internet is in these places, you know, largely very filtered. So there's a lot of reasons that free access, you know, to credible and reliable information is important. There's a lot of like humanitarian reasons that this is important. So for instance, you know, on the top of the list is human rights. When human rights abuses are going to happen in a country, one of the first things that they do is they will kick out all of the foreign journalists, and then they will block access to the internet so that people can't talk about the human rights abuses that are happening, right? Another thing that happens, a lot that's been happening more and more recently, is if you're going to do some election fraud, if you're going to say, have the president for life be reelected and like 99% of people vote for the same person that they always vote for, they'll turn the internet off in the whole country so that people can't do any kind of election monitoring because they don't have the connectivity they would need to be able to do that. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of reasons that free information access is important. And I want to talk a little bit, just because, you know, it's the EFF Austin event, about the history of why we think of the internet as a place that we can find, you know, like credible and reliable information. And this comes back to like the history of when the EFF was started. So like John Perry Barlow, who was one of the founders of the EFF, also wrote this document in the 90s called the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace. And it was very influential, like, to people's thinking. And, you know, it's just this very poetic, you know, it says governments of the industrial world, You weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. It's like, oh, that's just, uplifting words. But is it accurate? And so I think like an even better, example of kind of this thinking was from the Hacker Manifesto, which was around the same time, where he says, this is our world now, the world of the electron, the switch, the beauty of the bod. We exist without nationality, skin color, or religious bias. That was our idea in the 90s of the internet. It seems a little bit naive now to think of the internet as a place that's free of any type of nationality or bias, but at the time that was the idea. It's like we don't need to be tied to our bodies. Like we're gonna have this place which is gonna be like pure information. And there's this idea in 90s internet theory of what they call the temporary autonomous zone, which is a place that's created between the established regions where temporarily it's kind of anarchy, right? Like you can have like freedom temporarily, but as soon as you try to delineate, as soon as you try to like talk about it, then it no longer becomes, that's why it's called the temporary autonomous zone, it goes away. And so we're far beyond the temporary autonomous zone phase of the internet, right? Like it's no longer this thing that like only a few people know about and you can get on there, like governments are trying to like regulate what you're saying and stuff. So next thing I want to talk about is, okay, so internet freedom. We had all of these great ideas about how the internet was going to be this free place in the 90s, and now, it's 2018. Why is it not working out? And it turns out that we made one little cognitive error in the way that we model what the internet is and how it works. And that is that the internet is physical. It is not a conceptual thing. It's a conceptual thing that actually has physical roots. So the way that the internet works, and a lot of people are surprised to find this out, is that there are wires. It's just made of wires. A lot of people think that it's wireless, right? But it's only wireless to the router, and then the router is plugged into some wires. Your cell phone goes to a cell tower, which then has some wires. A lot of the wires are on telephone poles, and then a lot of them are also buried underground. And that's the internet. It's just a big collection of wires. And the reason is because transmitting electricity through a wire is a lot more efficient, and you can go a lot farther and a lot faster than doing it through air. So if you want to transmit electromagnetic waves through air, it's very just expensive, and so wires are just more efficient. So this is a picture of so how do we get internet in between continents? There's a wire, there's just a cable that goes across the bottom of the ocean, and this is a map of all of the different internet cables. So like if you see, if you see up here, they've only got one cable. If that gets cut by, and this happens all the time, boat anchors just dragging through international waters, they don't pay attention to where the cables are and they'll cut that. No internet, that's it. And so, here we got, we got a bunch, but still they get cut all the time. It's a real problem because that's how the internet works. Here's actually a picture of the internet. This is it. This is the cable. It's not even that big. It's not even that big of a cable. Okay, so why is this problematic that the internet is a physical thing? So in addition to the fact that anybody can just cut the cables, which happens all the time and is a real problem, the way that the internet works is that you have all the cables coming into a room, and then they're all plugged together, right? So like if like I'm on T-Mobile and you're on AT&T, T-Mobile and AT&T both own wires, and those wires go into a room where they get all connected together. And they say, okay, T-Mobile traffic, we're going to send to AT&T, AT&T traffic, we're going to send to T-Mobile, and that's why it's called the internet, is because it's a bunch of networks, separately owned networks that are all connected together, and they're connected together in these rooms, which are called a point of presence. So for instance, on each place where that cable from the ocean lands, there's a room, there on the coast that hooks it up to that country's local internet providers, right? And so the problem with this kind of centralized, there's only so many of these rooms in the world, is that you can have somebody just sit there and look at all the traffic, and they can just say, okay, who's trying to access Facebook? Not today. And then there you go, right? And so we think of the internet as being this decentralized, anarchic thing, and that's just not really how it exists in its physical structure. It's very hierarchical. So in some countries, you'll have all of the internet traffic of the entire country going through like one building, like one data center, where you've got people looking at all of it and deciding what to allow and what not to allow. Now, for efficiency reasons, they don't actually use people. Oh wait, no, we're not to that yet. Sorry, we'll get to that. Okay, so right, the other thing we're gonna talk about, internet shutdowns. And a lot of people, when I talk to them, Americans, cannot believe that this is like really how it works. But in a lot of countries, they will just turn off the whole internet for the whole country. There's this website, Access Now's Keep It On campaign, where they talk about, they track internet shutdowns. So usually they're like from 24 to 72 hours. They happen for different reasons. Sometimes they happen because it's like reactive. So like if there's protests against the government, they'll say, hey, we're gonna shut off the internet because you've been bad and we're mad at you. Sometimes it's preemptive, like if they're gonna do election fraud, they'll shut off the internet during the election. India has had, in this year, 2018, which is not even over yet, last time I checked, 52 internet shutdowns in various states of India. So for the whole state, they'll turn it down. One of the reasons they've been doing it in India, or so they say, so the official reason is that they have these like exams, like that everyone takes. If you want to be in the civil service, you have to take this exam. It's a big deal, and they don't want people to cheat, so they just turn off the whole internet for 2 weeks, so no one can cheat on the exam. Now, what happens to all the people that need the internet for other reasons other than cheating on exams? Well, they also don't have the internet because they turned off the whole thing. So, you know, it's a problem. It's a big problem. Right, okay, great. So, internet freedom, how are we gonna save it? Well, that's what we do at the Operator Foundation. That's our whole mission, is to save the internet so that everybody can get access to that credible and relevant information. Right, so essentially this is like a conceptual model of how internet filtering works, right? You have somebody there and they're looking at the internet, and the cats here, cat pictures, represent all of the good things on the internet that we love, that we want, that we need, but that the man does not want you to have. They don't want you looking at cat pictures. You know, that could be access to like healthcare information, election results, whatever, right? That's the good stuff. And then we got bananas here, just irrelevant stuff. Like it's not like they only let you look at certain things. They only block certain things, and everything else, everything that's irrelevant is allowed through, right? So, you know, basically that's it. You got somebody, they're like, is it a cat picture or not? Is it a cat picture or not, right? That's what they're doing. For efficiency reasons, they don't use people though, is the thing. They use robots, right? So that are trained by people, because you gotta look at all the internet traffic for the entire country simultaneously, right? Imagine all the people streaming Netflix in your country, like you gotta look at all of it and be like, what are they watching, you know? So they train these robots. And so that is what gives us a way to be able to defeat the internet censorship, right? Because we don't actually have to fool a person. We have to fool a robot that was chained, like, you know, not even in AI. AI is stretching it, like if you is or whatever, right? So all we have to do is we have to take the traffic that they're trying to block and just dress it up so it looks like the traffic which is allowed through, right? So that's it, that's all we have to do. That's like the cats like bananas, they fool the robots and then we get them through. And that is, you know, what I did my dissertation on, and that is what we spend a lot of time doing at the Operator Foundation. The very, you know, the details, the technical details, it's like how deep do you want to go? I could talk for 2 hours just on the technical details of how the filtering things work and how we defeat them. So I got you guys some, you know, some follow-up reading if you want. So Operator Foundation has a project called Shapeshifter, which you can put in any application. If you're an application developer, you put it in your application, and then your application does not get blocked in these countries that are trying to block your application, right? So you have like a chat application or like a VPN, you can put our technology, it's free, it's open source, that we're making it for. There's a specification on how to write these, like these things that hide your traffic. It's called the pluggable transport specification, and that's something that we worked on. We worked on that specification with a bunch of different internet freedom tools like VPNs and censorship circumvention tools and stuff. We wrote to make this thing where essentially anybody, any researcher that comes up with a new cool idea on how to hide your traffic can just make it as a little module and you can pop it in and then you can start using that. Because it changes all the time, like what people block and how they block it changes all the time. So there's an active area of research on different ways to hide your traffic. So like just as an example of one of these things, there was one of the early papers in the field called Skype Morph. and it makes whatever you're doing looks like you're having like a Skype video call, right? That's an example of the sort of thing that people do. And then I gave a talk at DEF CON, which is a great hacker conference. It just happened. It happens in the summertime in Las Vegas. So I gave a talk called Defeating Internet Censorship with Dutch, the polymorphic protocol engine. And then also I have my PhD dissertation, circuit bending network filtering with polymorphic protocol shapeshifting. I know it's like so long, that's why I put it on the slide so that you can, you can look it up later. So if you really want to get, there's like charts and everything. If you want to get into the nitty gritty, then you can read about that. Okay, so what about internet shutdowns? So unfortunately, changing your traffic to disguise it doesn't work if there's no internet at all. We need like a totally different solution for the situation in which there's no internet at all. And so, so that's when the hardware comes out. So I got some of my little hardware devices here for everybody to check out. So this is, right, so this is what we call the Emergency Data Exchange Network, or EDN is like an acronym because everybody loves acronyms in the grant-funded world. So yeah, we have 3 different models of this. And so normally we don't talk about like unfunded projects. This is a prototype just for everybody here in the room to check out because we're hoping to get funding for this soon. And I just want to talk about kind of the concept behind it. So this is Arduino compatible. I don't know if you guys know Arduino. It's like a very inexpensive computer that you can program, just like plug it into your computer with USB, and you can program it. Everything's free, everything's open source. So this is an Arduino compatible computer in here, and a little 3D printed case. And then what it has inside of it has this like a little processor, and then it has this, and this is the key to our technology, is there's this new radio protocol called LoRa, which stands for long range, which allows us to get 2 kilometers of range just with this device, just with this antenna. You don't need any fancy like satellite dish type antennas and stuff, like just this little shorty one, you can get 2 kilometers. And so what we have developed with this is it's essentially like a peer-to-peer text messaging. So you connect to it on your phone, and then you can send messages back and forth. And the key, about this as compared to what other people have been trying to do in the space is that it is low bandwidth, low power sort of thing. So it's not like a Wi-Fi, you can't watch YouTube on it. It's just for when the internet for the whole country goes out, you can send text messages back and forth so that you can coordinate, like protecting against human rights abuses, doing election monitoring, stuff like that. And then we have another kind of versions of this in development. We have this one that allows voice communication. There's this great open source voice compression protocol called Codec 2 that allows you to get half a second of audio in each little transmission that we do. And the cool thing about the technology we're building with this is that you can make any one of these to make a repeater. A repeater is something that basically like takes your traffic and then repeats it so that you can double the range, right? So I could put one of these, at the top of Capitol Factory here, and then anybody who could see it anywhere in town could kind of bounce through it. And like yeah, do you have a question?
Yeah. Is the Arduino clock the limiting factor on that guy there?
No, I wouldn't say the Arduino clock because this is not like your typical not like Uno. It's not like one of those 8-bit Arduino processors. This is actually a 32-bit processor. I think it's like 48 megahertz. Don't quote me on that. I have to look at the
What is the limiting? Sorry, what is the limiting factor?
Yeah, it's the radio protocol. So the LoRa protocol is a low bandwidth protocol that has a long distance. And so you could use a different radio, and then you could get something that's shorter range and higher bandwidth. But the reason we're using the LoRa protocol is because we're able to. The idea here is, you're in a city and you got to coordinate over like the whole city when the internet is down. So, I have just the little parts if anybody was looking at. So the cool thing about the way we're doing this is these are commodity parts. These are from Adafruit in New York. So these are open source hardware, and so this is the little processor here. It's got like a little Wi-Fi access point, so you can talk to it from your phone. This is the little radio with the LoRa chip on there. Antenna goes on there, and then that's it. You just pop them together, and then you're ready to go. So you can order these parts internationally. Like you don't have to get them from us. You can just get them from Adafruit's international distributors. And then what we provide is the design and the case and the operating system that allows you to do the text messaging and all that. Yeah.
How much is that in US?
Oh yeah, so that's a good question. And again, this is a prototype, so none of the features or specs or pricing or anything is, if we ever come out with this, like it won't be, you know, necessarily what I'm saying, but, so these on a 1 unit at a time basis cost about $100.
Okay.
And the next version, the next thing I'm gonna talk about is 300. So we also have a satellite bridge. And this is a very exciting feature. We use the Iridium satellite network. That works anywhere in the world, even in the ocean, even on the poles, and it meshes with the text messaging. So like if you can see, like if I put a satellite link up on top of the building, anybody that's within range can bounce through it and access the satellite. Yeah, and it meshes with the text messaging. So actually, when you send something through the satellite, a person in some other country just gets a text on their phone, and they text you back, and it goes through the text network into our servers, and then back through the satellite network. So it looks to other people like you actually have texting coverage, even though you're in a country that has no mobile phone connectivity at all because they've turned the whole thing off, right? So it's kind of like I just get like a seamless experience, yeah.
Is that just SMS, or does it also allow like multimedia stuff?
SMS only, because the key to our technology is that it is very low bandwidth. So like multimedia would not be like, even sending images would just be like too much bandwidth. It would be too expensive. So you know, that's why we call it the emergency data exchange network, because this is something it's only designed to be used when your normal internet is out, and so you have no other option, right? When the normal internet comes back on, you want to switch to that so you can, you know, watch YouTube and stuff like that. So yeah, so the key differentiators between our technology that we've developed for internet shutdowns, yeah.
Does it support end-to-end encryption, or can anyone read the messages?
That's a great question, and that's a very interesting question too, to me. So, we would love to do end-to-end encryption. We do a lot of stuff. We work within encryption a lot. Unfortunately, there's no end-to-end encryption on SMS text messages. So if you want to be able to bridge to the normal SMS text messaging network and be able to send and receive texts with people that do not have any special sort of software installed, then there's no way to do end-to-end encrypted messaging. And some people in the past have kind of had something where it was like a hybrid, like when you're sending messages to people on SMS, it's not encrypted, and when you're sending messages to people that have the app, it is encrypted, and we find that's like very confusing experience, like they don't know, users don't know if things are or are not encrypted. A lot of people used to think that Iridium was encrypted, and there's a great CCC's, like a German hacker conference, there's a great talk where they managed to figure out how to decode Iridium text messages, and like show a bunch of messages that people have been sending that they thought was encrypted. So there's no encryption anywhere, but we have all of the technology like that we can run on the chip to do end-to-end encryption. So if we find that there is an opportunity to do it down the road, it would be easy to turn on. The only reason we're not doing it is compatibility and usability. Yeah.
So like talking about app-to-apping and they use encryption, why not just include something that signifies a key was sent? That way they know it went from app to app. Like just like a small like, it just like includes like as part of the text message, also PGP or whatever you want to use, small key, short form.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good idea. Yeah.
The compatibility issue is from an EDN system to a non-EDN system. That's
well. So if you want to do a normal, so we're not actually using SMS like at all in the EDN system. So it's peer-to-peer using this LoRa protocol, and then it's through Iridium using the Iridium protocol. And when you go through the satellite through Iridium, we have a bridge that bridges to the normal compatibility with the SMS texting for like people. Like the idea is like, so you're in the country with no connectivity. You want to text out to people that are in another country that have a normal cell phone. That's the compatibility idea, right? If we gave up that idea, if we were like saying like only people with EDN devices can text other people with EDN devices, then absolutely we could do end-to-end encryption. That would be no problem. But
and also vastly decrease the potential user base.
Well, so that's the idea is that you're going to want to text people that just have a normal phone because you know that's like you want to reach out to people in other countries. Like you want to talk to journalists, you want to talk to people that have information and stuff. Yeah.
How do you provision through Iridium?
Oh, provisioning. That's a great question. This is just a prototype, so we don't really have any kind of provisioning, right? Like I just manually provision everything, right? Now for the satellite stuff, you do need, because of the way Iridium satellite works, for the satellite stuff, you do need like a subscription to a satellite service, and you do need to like set up your billing and everything for that. So our model generally is like, we don't provide services, we provide technology, we provide designs, and then we provide like the software and everything. So we work with partners, we work with nonprofits in each individual country that have access to the actual user base. So were we to actually deploy this, we would work with the partners and they would do all the provisioning locally for their user base, and they would set up all the billing and everything. Nobody would be paying us, right? Because we're a nonprofit. We get grant money, we make things, and then we give it to people. Provisioning is a big issue, and a lot of this technology, like the LoRa technology, comes from kind of the Internet of Things space, and we're kind of repurposing it for this emergency communication space. And they put a lot of thought in the Internet of Things space into provisioning, although I'm not sure that they really have the answer yet. Provisioning is hard, right? Getting like everybody set up on your network and making sure that, you know, like people that are on, like different groups of people that set up a communication network, like you don't want like crosstalk between them and things like this. So I mean, we've done a lot of research in this space specifically. We've done a lot of research about how emergency communication organizations do their setup, right? And so, yeah, anyway, there's a lot to talk about on the provisioning side, but we don't have it totally answered because it's just a prototype. Cool, so yeah, so I guess I talked about a lot of this, but the two things I want to mention is just that, so when people, a lot of times when they try to use like mesh networks and stuff, they're looking at stuff like 802.11, they're looking at things like hikers and like concert goers and like these kind of like other use cases for alternative communication. So we've really looked at it as the emergency communication network. So that's people that go into disaster areas, people like the Red Cross. They have a whole different kind of way that they do their communication, where essentially it's either like peer-to-peer, like you can think like walkie-talkies, right? Like I have a walkie-talkie, you have a walkie-talkie, we can communicate without, you know, like a cellular network. And then they have these things called repeaters, which are essentially just a radio that's like up on a hill or something, so that I go to the radio and then to your walkie-talkie. That way we can talk, you know, over a mountain. Yeah.
How, like, I guess, what would be the, you've already established that the target audience of these are like generally people in these areas with corrupt governments and shit. But like, what is the, I guess, technical background that's required?
There's no way to do over-the-air updates, right? Like you need to plug it in via USB in order to do an update. So, you know, that is, you know, like a potential downside of technology is you need somebody that's going to be doing all the provisioning, is going to be doing all of the updates and everything.
27 kilobits a second. Good luck.
That's the other thing is, yeah, like with the bandwidth that we have, over-the-air updates would be difficult. We could do over-the-air, we could do over-the-air like configuration changes and stuff like that, like having them like over-the-air programmable in terms of like their settings and things. But in terms of the actual firmware, there's just not really a way to do it with this technology.
These are, I think, problems that should be solved perhaps in other ways. I mean, the purpose of these is, my understanding, is to be used when the internet goes away. These are not countries that never have internet, ever.
That is absolutely correct. And that is my last point here is urban deployment focus, is that a lot of the devices that people make are for like countries that don't have good internet connectivity at all ever. So they're like, people are focusing on like these like rugged, outdoor, solar powered, you know, sort of things. And that's not what we're working on. This is like, you're not gonna be using this for more than like 2 weeks. That would be the most that an internet shutdown.
Right. But for like an ODA update, the bandwidth doesn't have to come from the emergency system.
Sure,
like
sure.
You can update over Wi-Fi when you have Wi-Fi.
Right, yeah. Although, you know, one of the problems that we have, for instance, is like, so we want you to be able to access this via your phone to send text messages and stuff. However, we've decided to go with like a mobile web approach that's like hosted on the device with like a hotspot, because if you want to actually have the users install an app, what we found in past situations is that users will not install an app before the internet shutdown occurs. Like you would think that they would think like, oh, you know, internet shutdowns occur regularly in my country, I should like prepare. And so like these like different nonprofits that we work with, you know, they'll do all the preparation, but in terms of the end users, like, so essentially what emergency communication people do is they have a thing called like a radio cache, which is a building that you can go to when something happens, and that all people have to know is like, well, when the internet goes down, I should go here and they'll like tell me what to do and give me instructions, right? You know, in terms of, yeah, so we need like some level of technical capacity to like be prepared, not on the end user side necessarily. Yes.
Can I add a comment?
Sure.
Just as I'm Corey, Vice President of Operating that.
And the designer for all.
But
design.
Brandon kind of made it sound like what we make, we kind of pass off, and it's like good luck. But we do work with our partners, you know, our selected partners. Like we've gone down to Mexico several times to work with them. So it's not like we just pass it off and say, okay, do your own updates. Like often, you know, we work with them and help them use the technology as well. So it's not a single sign off, or you know, people come to us and say, hey, we need this technology. How do we do it? And we just say, oh, you know, here's a GitHub. If there's a group of people who actually need access to it, like we work with them to set it up.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, we work with the partners, and so like, you know, if they have trouble, like if updates turned out to be something that's a big problem for them, then we can, as long as there's a technical solution, we can make them, you know, like an app. Like we can make them an app that like makes the updating process, and you just like plug it in and push a button and then you go, or something like that.
Right, and one more. Yeah. And our solutions that we've done in the past are really purpose fit. Like I said, I mentioned the journals in Mexico. We actually go down and talk to the users. So it's all, there's more, it's not just like this technical aspect, but there's also a lot of user experience that we put into our various other products and software.
Yeah, that's a good point. If we are going to deploy this, we're going to deploy it with a specific group, and we'll tailor it to them before we deploy. I'm talking about in a kind of a generic sense here, but like it would be, like we would know everything about what's happening in that country in terms of like what their needs are going to be, and then we would make like an app that's like specifically for them.
I guess this is actually a nerdy just question about your software development, but you know, because I was thinking if you guys aren't doing this, it might be helpful with your issues of like getting updates out and having extreme bandwidth limitations. Are you, like, as far as your versions or revisions of the software, are you doing it with essentially a delta management system, or rather a lot of app developers will just reinstall the whole thing? Like when you send an update, are you just pushing the delta of whatever the changed binaries are and nothing else?
Yeah, so we use GitHub for everything. Okay. All of our stuff is, this stuff is not on Git because this is not a funded project. Like I said, this is just a sneak peek for the people that are here about something that we hope that we're going to be able to do. Once we actually get funding, then we'll put all the source code and designs and everything online. But yeah, we use GitHub. Yeah.
Just a scenario that came up, I'm wondering if it's covered. Say that there was a state actor like Russia was interested in not necessarily turning off the communication, spoofing it in order to confuse the end receiver, which is a tactic that they often use. What are there any ways? Is there any thinking about that in the design for this that could authenticate the, you know, who's using the device and who's sending out the information?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that comes down to what we call in security like a threat model. Like in the threat model, we define who the attackers are and what capabilities they have and what sort of attacks they might do. And the specific attack that you're talking about is specifically in our threat model as something that we are not worried about happening. So we do cover that in our threat model document, but we don't cover that in terms of, we don't have like a defense for that attack. There's a lot of ways to do that. Mm-hmm. That's certainly something like which is defensible. But yeah, but currently what we've determined from our needs assessment is that that's an attack, like people infiltrating the network is not something that we're concerned about for the specific use case that we're designing it for. Okay. But we've certainly put a lot of thought into it, and if that comes up as a needs, then, you know, we have.
So there is a thing in the boutique audio synthesizer space that came up with, which is audio bootloaders, which where the data file, the firmware update file, will be encoded into an audio file, and then you can just plug in like a phone or a CD player or something, and it'll basically put it into a special mode, and it'll update the firmware through that. And that's an open source like Arduino thing. So.
Well, that is very cool. Please send me the link to that. That sounds very interesting.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Let's see what more. Just peek at some other slides. Oh, and then yeah. So that is basically all my slides. Cool. So I just want to say, you know, a couple things that we get into questions. You know, one is we are an organization. We do. The amount of people that ask me if we accept Bitcoin is much more than the number of Bitcoin donations.
I frankly would hold on Bitcoin, you know, keep your Bitcoins.
Oh yeah, no,
That's the problem with Bitcoins in general.
Yes, but we're, as a nonprofit, we spend all of our money to help people and maximize the number of help. But, so everyone always asks me that, so I just have a whole slide just for that.
I mean, I'll pay you in Bitcoin if it goes back over 10,000. Then I'm making a profit, then I can pay you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then also, I wanted to mention that we do have a mailing list sign-up sheet here. If you sign up for our mailing list, you can have a button or a sticker. That's the carrot to get you on a mailing list. These are all designed by Corey. She does all of our designs. So we actually made these at the EFF party. She brought a button maker to our EFF booth, and we just made buttons all night. So you know we have these. So please do sign up for the mailing list.
Actually, while we're on mailing lists, we have a mailing list too, and you can sign up for it by going to the EFF Austin website. There is a link to get on the mailman there. So
are there stickers or buttons?
We do have swag. Actually, if you go to our online store, which is a link on our website, we sell a bunch of swag. We sell mugs, we sell t-shirts, we sell bumper stickers. We partner with a local company, Bumper Active, to do that, and you pay us, you support our work if you buy that stuff. So yes, go on there and buy our swag, please.
So does this icon suggest that you support rotary dial-up?
Yes. Corey, would you like to explain the logo?
I just assumed it's about the security of analog over digital from a spying standpoint.
So I will explain the name of the company, Operator Foundation. So in the olden days, when you had a wired telephone, before we had touch tone dialing or even rotary dialing, you would pick up the phone and there would be someone on the other end, which was the operator, and you would say, "Hello, operator, can you connect me to Chicago?" And then the operator would connect you to Chicago, and then you could talk to whoever you want to talk to. So that's what we do. We are the human element that helps people connect when the technology doesn't work to let them connect. So, thank you. Yes. So that's the idea. And so the logo is an O for operator, and then there's also a rotary phone dial. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but before. Yes.
Part of the secret is that I grew up in rural Alaska, and when I was a kid, we had a party line and a rotary phone. So for me, it was like, oh man, this is what a phone looks like.
So let's open it up to just general questions. I know there were a lot of interest in internet shutdown devices, but we can also talk about general internet stuff. Yes.
I have sort of, I guess, two questions.
Let's do one, and then we'll get to the next one.
Well. I guess one is a quick one I would like you to address, and the other one is one that if you have time might be fun for this audience.
Let's start with the first
Okay, and this is something that I already have my opinions and answers on, but I would like to get yours on the topic because it comes up a lot in these discussions, which is there is a common argument that comes out of the anti-net neutrality crowd where they basically argue that actually being for net neutrality is being against internet freedom because you're giving the internet to the government. I already know why this is a ridiculous argument, but I would be curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Can you phrase it as a question?
Why is government support net neutrality the way to go if we want a free internet? Why should the FCC be upholding Title II regulations?
Yes. Unfortunately, I don't actually follow American issues at all.
No American issues.
Yes. I'm pro net neutrality. Yeah, net neutrality. I like it. Why should the government be involved? I don't know. I have a fun story.
If anybody wants to talk about it. I was curious about Brandon's response.
Let me tell you a fun story about net neutrality and FCC regulation. So I used to work at BitTorrent. I don't know if anybody knows BitTorrent. It was an actual company. That's something a lot of people don't know about BitTorrent. And so it was a thing you could download stuff, and it was like faster and like more efficient than a normal download. And so I was working at this company, and I don't know if anybody remembers, but Comcast got into trouble with the FCC because they were throttling BitTorrent connections. Like they were, this was kind of a very early net neutrality case where they were saying, oh, if you're using BitTorrent, we're gonna stop it. and they got in trouble with FCC and they were fined and everything. So BitTorrent had a very good analytics team, and so before the FCC found out that this was happening, we at BitTorrent were like, hey, there's something happening on the Comcast network. We did, some forensics, and we realized what Comcast was doing, that they were screwing with our traffic. So I was actually the person that BitTorrent sent to Comcast headquarters to try to talk some reason into them. That was my job. I was the director of product management on the enterprise side. They were an enterprise, hopefully customer. So I went to Comcast and I said to them, so we've heard that BitTorrent is crushing your network. You don't have the bandwidth to keep up, and so you started throttling us. It's cool. We will give you some free technology that will make BitTorrent better on your network, faster, and save you all this bandwidth that that we're using up all your bandwidth and your staff. And then they said, oh, no. We don't have a bandwidth shortage. That's just what we tell the government so they don't regulate us. They let us self-regulate because we say like, oh no, we have to regulate or else our network will be crushed by all this internet downloading, right? So like when they talk about things about how, the reason they have caps and stuff is because of these like greedy internet users that use too much bandwidth. That is just not how the internet works at all. It's true that like if someone on your cell tower was like somehow using a lot of data, like maybe your cell tower, there's like too many people on your cell tower, it's clogged, but it's like, it doesn't clog up the whole internet, right? Especially like across like Comcast's like entire service area, like they don't have any shortages, right? And the other reason that, that they wanted to stop BitTorrent is, the internet companies and the cable companies have merged. So they don't want you to watch movies on the internet. They don't want you to watch Netflix. They want you, and this is what Comcast told me, like this is not interpretation. This is what they told me. We want you to like essentially like buy a movie and then like you're paying us like $20 for a gigabyte of data instead of like pennies for a gigabyte of data, right? Like we want you to buy ringtones. Like we want to not be a utility where internet like data is like water and it's just basically free. We want the price of data to go up. So we want you to buy stuff. So what they actually tried to do was they tried to buy our video store that we had. They're like, we liked the BitTorrent. There used to be like a BitTorrent video store. It's like a Netflix competitor. And Comcast was all like, yeah, we want that. We want a video store. Can we buy yours? And we're like, that's not our business, is to make like white label video stores. Like we want people to use BitTorrent, And so they were all like, yeah, we're definitely not interested at all in doing anything with you. So anyway, yeah. So if it wasn't for the FCC, there wouldn't have been any regulation. Like self-regulation leads to the sort of situation, that happened in this story.
But it's also artificial scarcity.
Yes, artificial scarcity is a way to, drive prices up. And I used to, like on my blog, at this blog, step3profit.com, I used to do every few years, I would track like how much does internet really cost you? Because as they keep changing the pricing, essentially what they're doing is raising the cost per gigabyte without making anything like faster or better. Like they just, like they'll move the caps and they'll change the bandwidth around, and it just keeps, going up. And that's the whole plan. The whole plan is to make internet cost more so that they can. And I said to them, don't you want to save on your costs? And they said to me, we're executives. We get paid on the amount of revenue that we generate, not on the amount of like total profit. So what we want to do is we want our revenue to go up while we're in this executive position so we can get these big bonuses. That's our motivation. They're very candid with me. Yeah.
So my question real quick was, once you realized you didn't want to do anything, was there any retaliation on your side to try to make the packets look different so people couldn't distinguish BitTorrent from other?
That's a great question. That is a great question. That is actually, so that is not just my first net neutrality experience, but that's my first experience with what they call in the industry deep packet inspection, which was the technique that they were using to tell this is BitTorrent traffic. Previously, they didn't really have a way to do that. Like they could tell what site you were going to, but they couldn't just be like, all of this traffic is all BitTorrent, even though it's going like all over the place. So that's actually how I got into this anti-censorship stuff, and that's what my dissertation is based on, is this deep packet inspection. So yeah, that's exactly what we did. Was we just said, okay, how's their technology work? How are they detecting and blocking BitTorrent traffic? And then we designed an encryption layer for BitTorrent that hides the traffic, and that, as far as I know, still works today. Like BitTorrent is the most blocked protocol on the internet because a lot of people that make, a lot of the vendors just go ahead and include a BitTorrent detector, which is very old and out of date and doesn't work, and just like have it on by default. And so BitTorrent is, but if you click that encrypt your traffic checkbox, then as far as I know, that still works like pretty much everywhere. Yeah.
It looks like we're almost out of time, but just
No, we have plenty of time.
cool. What are the projects that you guys are doing right now that you're most excited about?
Oh, great question. Thank you so much for introducing my bonus slide. So these are some of the things that we're working on right now. These are kind of like current projects. So Moonbounce is a project we did. So I don't know if anybody knows what a VPN is. A VPN is essentially a software that you turn it on and it connects you back to your like home network or office network, and then you could use that internet in order to access the internet. So if you travel across the world, you can connect back to like your home internet, and you know, you can do things like watch video streams that aren't available in that country, or just have all your data encrypted so that the government of the country doesn't steal all your trade secrets. There's a lot of good uses for VPNs. So Moonbounce was an example of this shapeshifter technology we make that hides your traffic in a VPN. So this is something that we want everybody to do that builds VPNs. So we made this example, but it's actually it's actually like a thing that you can download and that you can like play around with. It's a big problem because in a lot of countries they're blocking all VPNs down. So if you're a traveler and you're traveling to these different countries, you can't get on any of the websites. I had a friend that their whole company runs on like Google Drive apps, like Google Docs and everything. And in some countries, there's no Google. So there's no Google Docs. And if you're there for work, you can't send email or Gmail, you can't access any of your documents. It's really bad. So you need something like a VPN, and so Moonbounce is our example. And we hope to do some more work with that if we can get some more funding for it and just make it really good and easy to use. One of the cool things about Moonbounce, it's got this social aspect. You have to run like a server in order to bounce your traffic through it. But once you have it, you can share it using normal macOS sharing to all of your friends, and then they don't have to know anything about servers, right? They can just get your link and then you go, and everybody, like, you can basically set up a little VPN server just like for your community. So that's, I think, could be cool. Another thing for app developers is, on iOS, Apple has really changed the way that you do any kind of VPN or other like network, integration. And so that's been really hard for people like Tor that have like these existing apps. They don't work as well on iOS anymore because Apple changed everything around. So we have a couple of cool projects in this space. One is, so Apple wants everything to be written in their language, which is called Swift. We have a pure Swift implementation of our shapeshifter technology. So if you have an app that's for iOS and macOS, you could just take our open source code and put it directly in your app and have your app no longer blocked. And if you don't even want to modify your code, there's a new thing called a network extension for iOS where you can install you could kind of like side load our thing so that all of the traffic on your entire phone is going through our shapeshifter technology. And you don't even need to modify your app, you just need to get people to install the network extension. So that's cool. And then OpenVPN is a very popular open source VPN software. It's like, there's like a free open source version. A lot of people use it in the open source world. We've been actually working with OpenVPN to get our shapeshifter technology into OpenVPN. So we have our own fork right now. We're hoping to get it merged in so that everybody can have it. But if you use our fork, you can have OpenVPN just just baked in, has this technology to obfuscate the traffic. I'm looking for somebody. Oh, no, I scared her away. All right. And then last thing is Postcard. I was mainly talking about internet freedom today, so we've been mainly talking about kind of this network stuff and like network protocol obfuscation and stuff. But we do other stuff, right? Like that's just what I was talking about today. So I really could not, finish talking about Postcard. It's a project that we're really excited about and we're really proud of. And it's an encrypted email application that we designed for journalists in Mexico City. That is a community that they have a lot of threats against their privacy. They have people like literally like stealing their laptops in order to get access to their confidential files, right? They're using like essentially just kind of like normal chat apps to send documents back and forth, unencrypted chat and stuff, like just normal SMS to send these confidential documents. They're doing things like, I'm gonna go to this place at this time, and it's like they could be kidnapped, and like sometimes they are. There's a lot of threats to their life and liberty to these journalists in Mexico City. So we said to them, you know, we did this work, we did these like user studies with them. We said, well, why don't you use encrypted email? You know, like that would really be like so much better. And they understood there was a need, and they were willing to make a change and like install some software. But when we tried to walk them through in setting up encrypted email, it was very demoralizing. They were like, listen, I'm not gonna use this. Like, this is too hard. I gotta get the people I communicate with to do this whole same thing. It's gonna be like, this is too hard. So we designed an encrypted email solution for them like from scratch. It doesn't use any of the decades-old technology that people use for encrypted email. It uses modern encryption, you know, software and standards, and it's designed to be incredibly usable. So it looks to you like a social network. Like you add people, they add you back, then you can send messages. But in the back end, it's actually just using your email account and sending your public keys and doing the encryption and doing the signatures. And there's no way in our app to ever send or receive an unencrypted message. There's essentially no way you can mess anything up. All you do is you install it and you add people and you just send it back to them.
But I take it as a consequence of that, you won't be able to send email to anyone who doesn't accept your friend request with the app.
It's true.
Because there will be no key exchange with
That's right,
them.
yeah. So with public key cryptography, you have to do a key exchange where you send them your key and then they send you their key. That's how the technology works. So, so yes. But if you think about it with this social network metaphor, you know, there are some networks where like you can't communicate with people unless you do a mutual friend.
Right.
So I think that we found that like people seem to understand the metaphor better than they understand like words like public key cryptography. So like in our software, you never see these words, right? Like we just explain to you this is a more secure way to communicate and it'll protect your privacy, and then here's what you do, and then we don't have all the jargon and everything.
Sounds like it's a lot easier to handle than keyside card.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Is that similar to Keybase?
So Keybase is software that is meant to integrate with existing public key cryptography solutions, but that tries to make the process more automated and easier. So like we have, I think, a similar goal with Keybase, except that we went a little bit farther and we ditched the compatibility with the old encrypted email software entirely and switched to a whole new like modern setup, which is easier. And so like, you know, one of the nice things about this, you know, for instance, is that when you're using something like PGP, you've got these very like large, you know, like attachments with your keys and stuff. Whereas in the modern stuff we use Libsodium, 32 bytes. That's your key. It's like so small, you know. Yeah, and then also we just found that, you know, switching to more modern cryptography, like the software development and maintenance costs just is like a lot lower.
Is that in use today?
So no, this is a project that, you know, we had funding and we did a couple of iterations. First we went to Mexico City, we talked to journalists, we said, what are your problems? We decided encrypted email would probably be what they needed. We designed the app, we went down, we got some feedback, and now there's a little bit more usability that we need to do, so we're looking for like a final kind of grant to get it finished and shipped. We will not ship anything until it's ready, because once we do, then we'll have users, and then, you know, like we can't change the format and things like that. So yeah, that's something we're definitely actively looking for a grant for right now. Yeah.
I've seen some countries where they're starting to leverage Ethereum networks for messaging, embedding the messaging in the smart contracts area. Can you touch any of that?
No, but it's an interesting concept. But we've now looked into that.
With low bandwidth communication, do you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to prioritize different types of traffic?
Yeah, and so that's actually one of the key features of emergency communication networks, as opposed to like more general kind of like Wi-Fi mesh or whatever. In emergency communication networks, you have this ability that if you have like an urgent message, if you have like the right administrative access to mark your message as urgent, you can stop all of the other traffic on the network and say, okay, everyone be quiet, let's only care about this message, and let's you know, like make sure that it gets there, and you can do things like receipt, you know, response and everything. And so yeah, that's a key feature. especially like if you have repeaters. So like repeaters are great because like you can't talk through a mountain, but if you have a repeater on the mountain, you can talk to the mountain and then back down the other side. The problem with repeaters though is that they double every message, right? So if you're using the repeater, it's like now your bandwidth is halved because half of the messages are sending and then half of the messages are repeating, right? So I think people have this idea that like we should just like saturate everything with like mesh networks, but it's the opposite. Like you want the minimum number of points and you want the least people talking as possible. So that's one of the things with the traffic prioritization is you say, everyone stop transmitting for 10 minutes. That way we can make sure this one message actually like gets to the repeater and then gets retransmitted. Yes?
Question, is there a publicly accessible map to where those repeaters are located?
Yeah, so we don't actually have, like for our technology, any repeaters deployed currently because this is just a prototype. But there are for other networks, they have repeater maps. In fact, Austin has the biggest Wi-Fi based mesh network. One of the biggest ones in the world is called Broadband Hamnet. And if you go on their website, they have a great map of where all of their nodes are located. Unfortunately, to get access to the map, you have to have an amateur radio license. I just remembered that. Like they won't let you log in if you don't have an amateur radio license.
Is that the digital one or the old one?
Yeah, no, it's digital. Yeah, Broadband Hamnet is digital. And yeah, so for a lot of like for the amateur radio stuff, there's like repeater directories that'll show you where all the repeaters are. And that's what a lot of the people in emergency communication use. They use these amateur radio repeaters because they're already there, they're already maintained. You have to have a license from the FCC to use them, but a lot of people in emergency communications have licenses, and they even sometimes will have multiple licenses, so they can talk on commercial radios, they can talk on amateur radios, and they can talk on like we have these public safety frequencies in the US, so like fire department and police, they have their own frequencies that only they're allowed to use, and they have their own repeaters that they're only they're allowed to use. Yeah.
A different kind of internet freedom that I'm curious if you guys have looked at or you have any thoughts on is the ability of individual actors to sort of astroturf communication channels and make it seem like there's broad support behind a certain opinion or a certain movement when really none exists.
Yeah, so that's that kind of relates to like kind of the fake news stuff. That is not something that we work at the Operator Foundation. Like all we're trying to do is give you access to the communications medium, and then you have to know like what the sites to go to where they have the credible and reliable information. That's like, it's a big problem, like finding out what's the credible information. And this is in my PhD in information studies. This is something that people spend lifetimes thinking about, is like how do you define credible and reliable information, and how do you tell what is credible and reliable. So that's kind of like where our effort ends is like slightly before we get to that point. But I mean, it is an interesting, very relevant problem right now. Yes?
Do you have any data or perhaps a position on how Shapeshifter performs on US related automated processing and China, either or?
Yeah, so we don't do anything with the US at all, and that's one of the reasons is what I was saying before, like US internet's pretty good. It's pretty good in terms of accessibility, right? So I don't really have any data on US internet. So in terms of other countries, it's very interesting. The way the filtering works, the way the blocking works in every country is slightly different. And there's a couple of reasons. One is they buy different equipment. And most countries don't manufacture and design their own equipment. Most buy it out of a few companies, mainly from California. There's like a few vendors that most people have. And that's how it is with internet, like routers and stuff, right? There's like a few big vendors, and like most people have that stuff. So so we kind of when we design our stuff, one of the things I did was I actually did an analysis of the popular hardware and how it works and what it specifically looks at in your internet traffic. Because there's a lot of these kind of academic approaches where they'll make some way to hide your traffic that would not really work very well when it was actually deployed, because of the fact that the way the filtering hardware works is not looking at the part of your internet traffic that you're hiding, right? Right, but your question was about performance. So there's different ways to hide your traffic, and the more extreme you go, the worse the performance is. And there's kind of a threshold where the performance gets so bad that the application that you're trying to use like no longer works. So when we design this stuff, we're trying to balance the level of obfuscation with the performance. And generally it's pretty good. It's pretty good, I would say, on most networks. There's some networks where they do more aggressive type of filtering. We have to do more aggressive obfuscation where I would say, for instance, like watching YouTube over an obfuscated link would maybe not work.
Sure, I was just referring to just connectivity, as in let's say we're in China, we're going to organize a protest in a couple days, and if anyone finds out outside of our group, we're all going to get demands or worse on our social score, which actually happened a couple days ago, or just the other day, as a lot of point-to-point finance stuff is imploding because of China. Obviously, I don't know if anyone's listening to that. Had announced new steps that's going to basically cut the knees off of about like a majority of point-to-point startups that have, and the people that are about to the 9/10 or more people that are losing their investment for cultural reasons that want the government to bail it out. We're going to protest, and that got shut down before it started. And so the hot topic, right, is that it's point-to-point stuff and it's detection related, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to that specific issue, but I would say, let me think. So
I guess just China. I'm just like, China's such a huge issue, and the quality of life there and connectivity is such a huge thing. You know, it's getting more tense by the month or year.
So I can't speak about specific countries, but what I will say is that yes, these issues that you're talking about are getting worse globally, pretty much everywhere. Like, pretty much the amount of internet filtering is going up, the severity of internet filtering is going up, and the amount of internet shutdowns are going up. There was a time when people thought nobody would ever block encrypted web traffic like HTTPS because that would cause like banking to not work and stuff. And there was an instance where one country shut off all HTTPS traffic in the whole country because HTTPS, encrypted web, hides a lot of what you're doing just already. And so they wanted people to switch. At the time, the way that the browsers work, they would just switch to the unencrypted version if the encrypted version was blocked. Browsers don't work like that anymore, but that's how it worked at the time. So they essentially just got everyone to switch to the unencrypted stuff in the whole country by just blocking the encrypted stuff. People thought, oh, they would never do that. HTTPS is the one thing that will never be blocked because banking requires it. And governments have gotten bolder and said, you know what, we don't care about banking. You know, and internet shutdowns show that. Like, there's nothing worse you can do in terms of internet filtering than to shut down the whole internet. And people thought, oh, that would never happen. That's crazy. But it's happening, more and more. So yeah, I think there's an increasing need for protection, for security, and for privacy, and for censorship globally. Yeah.
As a follow-on to that, sort of related to China, how does Google entering the Chinese internet market space affect how you're thinking about how you make Shapeshifter, or does it?
So I can't talk about specific countries, but what I will say is that pretty much any company that is operating in another country is following the laws of that country. And so if they have some laws that say, like, you're not allowed to provide access to certain material, like if people search for this term, you must block it, that's what everybody, does, right? So now we also follow all of the laws of the country. We don't encourage anyone to do anything illegal or help anyone do anything illegal either in the US or where they are located. However, the way that blocking works is they don't generally pass a law that says you must block this protocol, like you must block all VPNs, like Facebook is not allowed. What they do is because it all happens in the data centers with the administrative people that are just told, like, hey, we don't want stuff that's critical to the government, find websites that are critical to government and block them, right? And so, but the upshot of that is that in most countries, it's not 100% of countries, there are some where they have passed some laws that make certain tools illegal, but for the most part, it's not illegal to use any kind of circumvention technology, right? If you access Facebook, when Facebook is blocked, it's fine, nobody's gonna come to your house, you're not gonna go to jail in most countries. because they never passed the law to make it illegal, so it's, it's fine. Yeah.
Is it the countries or could it be the network providers themselves? Because I saw websites that were not shown up on computers, but that could be pulled up by phone.
Yeah, so generally, blocking is done by individual network providers. It is the case that in some countries, there's only one network provider for the whole country, which is owned by the government. And in other cases, there are multiple providers, but they're all operating with a license from the government. So if the government says you must block this, they have to comply or they will lose their license to do business. And then, so generally everybody complies, right? Like if somebody says block this website, it's gonna get blocked. There's really no recourse. But yeah, it is by provider. So depending on if you're in a big country that has a lot of internet, depending on where you are in the country, you'll be exiting through a different provider. And the blocking, the filtering does vary, depending on where you are. Yeah.
But it also depends on where the website is hosted, because I came across where I could have it hosted out of different areas within Europe or the States. So what should I do? Should I have it hosted out of here then to be on the safe side, or could I have it hosted cheaper somewhere else?
That's a great question. Yeah, so it does matter where it's hosted because two things. One, there's the path that your internet connection takes from where your computer is to where the website is. And so it travels over different cables depending on, like what path it needs to take. Now in some countries, all of the traffic for the whole country is going through one data center, in which case it doesn't matter where it's hosted. But in other cases, you're gonna go through different exit points depending on where it's hosted. The other thing is that the place where you're hosting the website, they can also be told to take down your website. And so there are people that were not able to host websites in country, and so they ended up hosting them in the US. And that, that's a very popular thing. It's like not hosting content that the government will not allow in that country, but to instead host it in another country. Yeah.
No question. Can you host websites in clouds yet?
Can you host websites in the cloud? Yes, most websites are hosted in some kind of cloud hosting.
But I mean that they will not be bound to a location.
Not bound to it. Yeah, so there was a technology that I used to work on at Freenet, was actually one of my early projects in like 98 through like 2002 that was based on that kind of idea of like, let's host websites not in a particular place so people can't take them down. And that was, I think, very relevant back then because the way that people would attack content is they would take the website down, right? And that was the attack. And since the attacks have now kind of evolved, so that instead of it being taking the website down, because you can move the website to a country where they won't take it down. You can find a provider that won't take it down. The attack now is not letting people in the country access the website, right? And so that's why we're working on this shapeshifter technology. It's a new attack that also blocks websites, right? It has the same effect even though it's a different attack. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of other technologies besides Iridium showing up, right? So there's multiple people trying to put up satellites. There's people like Google that have at least thought about playing with balloons, and other people talking about it, like Facebook has a conversation. How are those things going to interact with what you're working on?
Yeah, so we've looked at all of these different options for deploying internet to people that are having an internet shutdown. And I think the great thing about using the Iridium satellite network, the reason I think it's the best option is because it works everywhere in the world. The thing with the balloons, right, is you have to launch the balloons and you have to have one of the balloons. So the way that the balloon internet works,
it's more like a repeater on a mountain kind of thing.
Yeah. So but the balloon internet actually, they're high altitude, so they launch them and then they circle the world. So they're kind of like low satellites. So for the balloon internet to work, like you need to have a balloon in range, which it's kind of random whether or not it is. So those are more kind of designed for, like when a balloon's in range, I'll like send some data and I'll get some data back. But like in the moment, like like we have a 24-hour outage and we need the internet now, it doesn't work so well. Something else we've looked at is laser internet. So essentially the LoRa stuff works in country to like blanket the city and get all your communication. And then what we use Iridium for is the out of country. Like you want to hop the border to a place that has internet so you can communicate with the outside world, right? And so the downside, I think, of using Iridium is it is jammable, right? So you can have a radio frequency jammer and you can run it and you can block all the satellite communication. And this has happened before, specifically like in a war situation, if there's like an active war, the government will take out all of their jammer equipment. But the thing about jammers is you have to continue running them, right? Like as soon as the jammers go down, then suddenly like the internet, the satellite internet works again. And the problem we had with laser internet was aiming the laser is really hard. Other than that, laser internet's a cool idea, but yeah.
Similar to Iridium, I think, is it the OneWeb, it's got an LEO constellation they're about to launch. I don't know what band they're using, KU band. Have you looked at them as an option?
Yeah, so we looked at all the different satellite internet providers. There's a lot of stuff coming out, right? Like satellite internet is it's gonna be big soon. But soon in the satellite world is like a while. Like you can't wait for satellites to launch.
Like a decade is soon.
Yeah, decade could very well wait a decade for these satellites to come online. The reason we chose Iridium over the other ones, so some of the other satellites, the problem with them is that you have to aim your receiver at the satellite, which we found was hard for users to figure out how to do the aiming and how to like tell if it's locked.
There's no longer a magic box.
Yeah, so like with Iridium, it's not perfect. The thing with Iridium is it needs a clear view of the open sky. So like if you're in between buildings, it's just not gonna work very well. It still might work because as soon as the satellite comes, you have a little window of time. But if you have a clear view of the sky, you don't have to point it. You just put it on top of a building or something, put it on top of a parking garage, and then it works. There's always an Iridium satellite above you anywhere in the world at all times. So from a usability perspective, some of the other satellite networks that just have the one satellite or like maybe 3 satellites, the pricing is better, the bandwidth is higher. There's a lot of advantages, but it comes down to the usability. Like Iridium is like because they have those satellites.
OneWeb's like 4,000 or 5,000 satellites.
Oh, well, that is a lot. Yeah,
they're launched. They're starting. I saw the command center.
Oh yeah, thanks. I would love some water. Awesome. Okay, awesome. Any more questions? Oh, I think we exhausted the questions.
I have one more. Okay, yes. I have one more. So you mentioned that ways that you guys have like a place where people can donate money, something that's where people can help. Are there any other ways that people can help that maybe don't involve money?
Let's pass around the sign up. Just pass it around. And if you want to sign up, do. And if you don't, it's okay. I want them. Yeah, so that's a great question. Like, how can people get involved and how can people help? One thing that, we're a small team, and we often have people, they want to, volunteer to do something, and our problem right now is just the staff to even coordinate and intake volunteers. We do have open source projects, right? So, people could contribute, programmers and stuff could contribute to those, possibly. We have, bug lists, and stuff like that. But yeah, that's something that I think that there's, especially in Austin, there's a lot of passion and interest in the topic, and so figuring out how we can mobilize people together is something that we've been thinking about a lot lately. One of the things we were thinking about is, so we need to make a bunch of these to send to different, human rights activists and people all over the world. So we're thinking we might have some kind of a thing where we have people come together and assemble these. You can 3D print the cases at home and bring them in. You can do the soldering, you can do all the uploading and firmware downloading stuff. That's something we've thought about doing, some kind of a hackathon where we build 100 of these and send to the journalists.
If you do that, let us know. We'll put out a call for volunteers. And I'm wondering, your code bases, are they remotely accessible? Can somebody who is given access rights remotely access your code base?
Yeah, everything we do, if it's this project is not out yet, but everything we do that's a released project is all on GitHub. Just the Operator Foundation.
Is it purely, but is it just purely released projects you need code help with, or do you need volunteers on not released yet? And is there a way to remotely access on your not released projects?
Yeah, so the problem with our unreleased projects is that we can't pay anyone to work on them because we don't have a funder, we don't have a line item in our budget.
Right.
So there wouldn't be, even if we could get people to get patches, there would be no one to merge the patches, so that's why we don't put them up.
Somebody would submit a pull request and there'd be nobody to actually check.
That's right, because no one is allowed to to build to that.
You can't build the dev check so it doesn't happen, basically.
Right, like no one would be allowed to work on it because they need to do all of their hours for our actual funders. So that's why we need to get, you know, a line item for that. One thing, you know, if you wanna get more involved is we do, and you know, you'll get the email if you sign up for the mailing list. We do with EFF Austin, we do a monthly Internet Freedom Technology Happy Hour, where we talk about the various, you know, projects we're working on and like what's happening in the world, you know. I can tell you everybody what's happening in Zimbabwe right now, what's happening in Ethiopia. There's a lot of internet freedom stuff, you know, happening, and so we do a monthly happy hour at Oddly Wells on the east side, and so that would be a cool thing when you could come and meet other people that are interested in the topics.
It's a good opportunity to come meet EFF Austin people as well, especially if, you know, this is a very formal structure. If you just want to hang out and shoot the shit, that's a good place to go and meet like-minded people.
Yeah, we just hang out. Corey?
And just to add to that real quick, even if you're not a developer or you don't have those technical skills, we are open to, you know, if you want to volunteer your time, we'll take any kind of time you got, because we have lots of different projects and we're always looking, you know, for feedback on different things. So if you, like, we had a lawyer come to one of our drink ups and she said, oh well, maybe I can give you a couple hours here or there. So even if you're not like a highly technically skilled person, come help me make a button sometime, you know, like all skill levels and all abilities are more than welcome. Just send us an email.
And that goes as well for EFF Austin as well. Like seriously, we're entirely volunteer run. If you want to work on these issues with us, like get with me, we'd be happy to have your efforts.
If someone wanted to volunteer to be a volunteer coordinator, that would really be
I mean that helps me too. It takes my bandwidth when I do other things.
And I think we're gonna do maybe in next October. We're gonna maybe have a conference/workshop where we're gonna teach people how to actually build all this technology that we do. So
I guess that actually might piggyback a little bit into what I was going to ask in my last question that somebody else asked.
Oh yeah, ask a question.
Obviously you posted all the references to learn more about how this stuff works. Could you maybe for the audience, since we do have a somewhat technical audience here, give a very brief dive into what the basics of hiding internet traffic consists of?
Yes, I would love to. And of course you could read my, you know, like 100-page
Right, but for those who maybe want to know but don't have time to read the 100-page paper.
Yeah, so you look at the internet traffic as a filter, and you look at the different qualities of the internet traffic. You say, these are qualities that are part of traffic that I don't like, and these are qualities that are part of traffic that I do like. So a great example is, and people are surprised, but this is actually the most common way to block traffic, is you look at the bytes at the traffic. You know, like computer data, it's in bytes, right? You look at the first byte, the second byte, the third byte, and you say, are these bytes that I know that they represent something that is bad? So a great example is every OpenVPN conversation on the internet, every time you open an OpenVPN connection, the first, second, and fourth bytes are gonna say, essentially, I am an OpenVPN connection. So it is very easy then to configure the filter to say, if you see a connection with the first, second, and fourth bytes are this, drop it. And if they are anything else, let it through. And now you've blocked all OpenVPN on your whole network while only looking at 3 bytes. And that's the most common thing. Another thing that people will look at is like data flows. So like for instance, if you're streaming Netflix, you can tell because you send a small little bit of request to Netflix saying, here's the show I would like to watch. And then it sends you back an hour of video data, right? So it's a very one-sided, tiny request followed by 1 hour. So, you know, that's the way that you can do it. One very effective thing that happened once to block circumvention tools is a lot of circumvention tools like to pretend to be web traffic. They like to be like, oh, I'm loading a web page, but it's not. It's actually like a VPN and like all of your internet traffic's going through this thing that looks like it's loading a web page. So what they did in this case was they said, okay, if any web page load takes more than 60 seconds, then shut it down. And that pretty much blocked all the circumvention tools in the country because no web request takes longer than 60 seconds. But what they were doing was they were doing this web request and then leaving it open for 2 hours as you put all of your internet data over this one thing that looks like a web request. So, you know, basically anything that you can think of in terms of like a quality that internet traffic might have, there's a theoretical ability that you might be able to make a filter that does that. However, we're not actually fighting against general purpose computation here. We're fighting against an appliance that that you buy, that you plug in, and has like a little web interface where you can check boxes on it. That's what the administrators do, right? So like they can't just write a general purpose program. That's not how these boxes work, right? They are only able to configure them within the parameters of the user interface. And so when you know how the boxes work and like which specific things they're looking for, then it's a lot more easy to defeat them than to think like, well, imagine if a person was looking at this and they would see this and know that it was fake. And that comes back to like my earlier point about robots, is we just have to fool the device. And it's not a very sophisticated device because it's trying to do things very efficiently, so it can do the internet traffic of the entire country in just a few of these boxes. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. We'll come to you second.
Is machine learning starting to step into that sphere where they're able to better monitor the traffic that is flowing through, or they're able to identify your workarounds a little bit faster?
That's a great question. So there are some papers on using machine learning to identify network traffic. The problem is being able to do it at scale. But we actually have a project that, again, thanks for introing my projects. I don't have a slide for it, but we have a project called Adversary Lab. And what we do, so people come up with these different, we call them pluggable transports, like these different ways to hide your traffic. And a lot of times they come with them up like in an academic lab setting. They say, oh, I've got a great idea to like hide traffic like so well, like no one will ever be able to find it. Does it actually work? Is it efficient? Is it effective against these devices? You could ship it to all of the users and deploy it in the field, and you could see if it gets blocked or not. That's going to take a couple of years. So in Adversary Lab, what we do is we use machine learning to train a filter that acts like the filters you'll find in the real world. And then we can test these different things and see if they're effective against our machine learning trained adversary. Now, we do not release our machine learning models because we're not trying to help the adversaries get better. We try to build the strongest adversary we possibly can in the lab and then use it to test things so that no one deploys something which could be defeated in the lab. They don't deploy it in the field, something that's like going to be broken in like a week, right? So yeah, and that's a cool project. Our problem with Adversary Lab is simply that we are with our algorithms, our machine learning algorithms we use, we're constrained in the complexity of the model by the amount of RAM that we have. So we have maxed out the RAM in our computer that we have right now, and so we can't do any bigger models. So we need to get a computer with more RAM, and then we can do that next level stuff. But I do think that like with Adversary Lab, we're doing some of the most advanced analysis that's out there. A lot of people just kind of come up with a cool idea and then ship it and hope that it's good. So just the idea of doing like some laboratory analysis, I think is helping to change the field. Yeah.
Real quick, how much RAM do you have?
We have 16 gigabytes.
16? Oh,
yeah.
Well, we can do better than that.
Yeah. Oh, and so when I say that we maxed it out, we don't have the max amount of RAM that machine could take. We have the max amount of RAM we could afford to buy. Right. So we could actually like, if someone wanted to give us some RAM, we could upgrade it.
Is it a desktop?
It's a desktop iMac. It's the last iMac that had user upgradable RAM.
I've got an old laptop that'll let me that is much more powerful.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, is modern RAM even pin compatible? Because I know they changed the number of pins on RAM at some point.
Yeah, no, we could definitely get some aftermarket RAM to upgrade our iMac. It's so expensive, that we don't have it. But yeah, the more RAM, the better. And then another project that I just throw that out there because people know about it, we have this thing called Transport Canaries. We actually look in a bunch of different countries every day to see which of these different techniques are currently being blocked and which ones are still working, so that we can inform the people that develop them, like, okay, like this country has changed their blocking techniques and your stuff no longer works and you should think about, updating it. So this is another thing we do.
Do you have the Transport Canary data publicly available? Can one see it easily?
No, so what we do is we publish it to this thing, UNI, which is like a network observatory data collection site. And so it just goes into their reports. They do a lot of data collection of all different types. They don't specifically do the sort of data collection we do, which is network level, like level forensic analysis of pluggable transport technology specifically. So they're not collecting that data. And so we decided, well, we're going to collect it, but then we just submit it all to them. So you could get it out of the UNI database, but like we don't provide services, so we don't provide like direct access to data. But it's all in UNI. Like we all send it to UNI.
So if you check UNI's reports, that information is there.
Yeah, and they have, it's all searchable, so you could find like just our data if you wanted to look at just our data. So I mean, it is available, it's just that we don't.
You don't offer it, but it is
foundation
publicly available.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
How's Oni spelled?
OONI. So you can go to ooni.torproject.org. They got a big tentacle logo.
Yeah, and they're great. They do reports like about different country-based filtering all the time and everything. Uni's a great project. Okay. Well, yes.
I just want to say I appreciate the LCAR's
theme.
Never gets old.
I've been trying to get him to switch it.
Yeah, this theme's not available anymore.
Color palettes, design,
consistency. This is like an old version of Google Drive. I had to import the template.
I just assume it's in honor of like Picard coming back to Star Trek.
Yeah, well, it's called the future of.
Yeah, I think the theme fits you quite well.
Okay, well let's wrap it up, and then I know there's going to be drinks afterwards. And,
Yes, we're all going to convene to have drinks at Firehouse Hostel and Lounge, which is the nearest bar here that isn't on 36. It's pretty great. So as many of you want to join us, we're all going to
do
join.
you need to let people know it's a secret bar?
Not everybody.
It's a secret bar, so you have to go through the sliding bookcase.
Oh yes, it is. It is in a hostel that is on between 6th and 7th on Brazos, and yes, it looks like a little hotel, but if you pull open the bookcase, there's a bar back there.
Speakeasy. Yeah.
But many of us are going to go over there, so if you've never been, just follow the big group, and you should go to the
Yeah, and anyone that signed up for the mailing list, please feel free to take a button or a sticker.
I like what you added.